What are the 5 things that retirees regret? I want to share these things with you today and talk to you about what you can do to make sure that you don't have these same regrets. And this information comes from studies that I've read, as well as from what I've seen in my own practice as I've helped hundreds of women and couples retire over the last couple of decades. Now, if we haven't met, my name is Liz Whittaberry, and I'm the founder of Best Path Advisors in Colleyville, Texas. And like I said, I've helped hundreds of women and couples retire safely and securely and with confidence, both in my local area and across the nation. So what are these 5 regrets, and what can you do to not experience them? Regret number 1 is retirees wish that they had retired earlier. And I think often people don't retire earlier because they just don't know that they can. Now, for some people, they can't. Obviously, there are people that enjoy working and don't want to retire earlier, but there are people that would retire earlier if they knew they could. And that may be you. A few years back, I had a couple that came in and they were planning to retire within the next 5 years. And they thought that they were coming to start this planning process in that retirement red zone, 5 years before retirement, just begin to get everything on track. And yet when I did their plan and I showed them the results, I showed them that they could retire the next year. And they did. It took a little bit of time for them to believe that this is really the case, this is really true, but it was true. And they're happily retired, and they're able to spend that time with grandkids and helping their kids and doing the things that are really, really important to them with their family while they still have some time to do that. Now, regret number 2 is people wish that they had spent more money earlier. And it's hard for people to shift from saving money to then spending money. And if you haven't experienced that shift, when you move into retirement, you may find that you also have a hard time shifting from saving to spending. It's a complete mindset shift. And so people want to spend money, but they don't want to spend too much. They know they're not saving anymore. They don't want to get a job again. And they don't want to spend money now that they're going to need later on. And so what can you do about that? Well, I had a couple that retired and they were spending quite conservatively. They wanted to do some travel, they wanted to do some big things, but they just weren't sure how much they could spend. So we sat down and we ran the numbers and I showed them this is the max spending that you can spend conservatively. And we put in all the stress testing for inflation and living longer, and the market, doesn't perform as well as we expect over the coming years. It doesn't perform as well as it has over the prior years. You have greater healthcare needs down the road. We tested everything, and they could spend more than they were currently spending. And so they upped their spending so that they could do the things that they really want to do while they're healthy, while they have more energy, while they feel good about it. They were able to see that they could actually shift to spending a little more money to do the things that they wanted to do. Now, both of those things, retiring early, spending more, the answer to that, to determine your situation, is to get a plan. Run your numbers, have a financial professional help you put the numbers together to see what is the earliest you can retire. What would your max spending be at that point? If you retired a year later or 2 years later, what would your max spending be at that point? Look at all of the scenarios to determine what makes the most sense for you so that you're not just retiring based on some set number in your brain. Oh, I got to work to 67 because that's full retirement age, Social Security, full retirement age. But you're actually looking at your own situation to see what makes the most sense. Now, regret number 3 is that people wish they had taken better care of their health. And this is one of those that sneaks up on people. If you're doing a little bit as you go along, you're walking, you're doing a little bit of strength training, you're, maintaining some flexibility, doing some stretches, then later in life, you're still able to do the things that you want to do. You're still able to walk and, bend and pick things up off the floor and all of the stuff like that. And I've seen clients in their 90s that were still very healthy and driving and living alone, and others younger than that who weren't able to move or needed some kind of assistance or needed a wheelchair. And so this one is important to just get some habits so that it doesn't become a regret later on. Regret number 4 is that people wish they had started a hobby. When you retire, you've gone from working, you didn't have a lot of time for hobbies. And a lot of people, when they first retire, may feel like, well, I don't really want to do a whole lot. I want to travel, but I don't really want to do a whole lot. But if you pick up a hobby from the beginning and you incorporate that as a habit, then over time you have that as something to keep you active, to keep you engaged, to stimulate your brain, to keep you younger. And people that did not pick up some kind of a hobby, it could be anything. It could be, planting in the garden. It could be joining a reading club. It could be, taking some classes. It could be picking up an instrument. Whatever it is that you would be interested in, if you start that right at retirement and do just a bit, but continue and keep it up, it keeps you younger mentally, as well as possibly even physically, but definitely keeps you younger mentally. And that's an important thing. And then regret number 5 is that people wish that they had traveled more. And I think this goes back to not knowing how much money that they could spend. And so they didn't want to spend on travel. So if you define how much money you can spend, then you have a better understanding of how much travel you can do. But it's important to get that travel in, whatever travel you're going to do, while you're younger and healthier and more active. And that means going ahead and doing it in those early years. You may be spending a lot of money in those early years, but then you're going to shift into a stage where you're not going as much, you don't feel like going as much, and you're not spending as much. And so in retirement, the spending is actually not straight line. It actually starts higher and then comes down. And then if you have health issues, it could go back higher again. But that spending is flexible during retirement. And so you want to look at that for your situation. What can you do to know when you can retire, to know how much you can spend, to develop some money for hobbies and travel and the things that you want to do, and make sure that you're taking care of yourself physically and mentally over your retirement so you're on your best path all the way through.